The faculty in the Department of English, Theater, and Speech at Bethany College, a member of the board of the Smoky Valley Historical Association, and director of its Oral History Project. Our guest today, September 22nd, 1985, is Paul Swensson, whose home is in Santee, California. Paul is a nephew of Dr. Carl Aaron Swensson, the founder of Bethany College, about whom Dr. Emery Lindquist, of course, has written in his definitive history of Bethany College. In speaking previously with Paul, I have learned a great deal about the Swensson family in general, and very interesting personal recollections, which Paul has graciously consented to share with us today. Paul, would you first tell us something about your grandfather, Pastor Jonas Swensson, the father of Carl, John, Luther, and Helga Swensson?
Well, in his young life, he couldn't decide what he wanted to do, so he was an apprentice to a carpenter for a while, and also a carpenter, and he got disgusted with that, so he decided to study for the ministry. And at the time he studied, the church was persecuting the Lutheran church, and he was very unhappy about that, and he decided to go to Uppsala University, and he spent 6 years there, and he took a 12-year course in 6 years, learned 12 languages, and was trained as a missionary. And when he graduated, they had a big party for him at the church and sent him and his wife on their way to America, and he landed in Sugar Grove, Pennsylvania. They'd promised him a beautiful home, and they had an old, dirty old log cabin for his home, and he was very unhappy. We found his diary, and he was complaining about the way he had to live, and he wanted to get out of there. And he also had a church at Jamestown, New York, and finally he moved to Andover, Illinois, and when he came there in ’65, they built a new church, and they said he was really tough on the people. If they didn't bring money, he went out and asked why they couldn't give money to the church, and the church is still there, and it's still beautiful condition, beautiful church at Andover. He also had an orphan's home built there, and my mother, her folks are orphaned, and she was young, and she came there, and she met Dad there, and then later on, Dad went to Lindsborg, followed Uncle Carl. Uncle Carl wanted him here. Dad was a musician, and he pumped the organ at the Lutheran church for Uncle Carl for years, and then finally played the organ. And he got married when he was about 21 years old.
Going back to Andover, is that the location of the renowned Jenny Lind Chapel?
That's right. The Jenny Lind Chapel is still there.
Did your father ever conduct services in that chapel? It was a small chapel. And he built the large church that
that was Grandfather Swensson. Yeah, Grandfather Swensson.
I understand that Carl Aaron Swensson came to Lindsborg at what age? 18, I believe?
18, the first time he tried out at the church, and they hired him at that time. When he got through school, he used to come back as their preacher.
At Bethany Church?
Yeah, Bethany Church.
Now, you have some recollections that I believe your mother told you about Dr. Swensson's activities.
Yeah. Our family, all of the 6 kids were born where Barclay now lives, just south of the museum. And
of the art center.
Yeah, the art center. And Uncle Carl lived across the alley, and Mother used to see him up practically all night. He had a study on the west side of the house, and he'd bring a lot of letters in the morning over to Dad. Dad was postmaster, and Dad would mail these letters for Uncle Carl. And Mother said sometime he was up all night. He'd see the light on all night. He was writing these letters, and he was begging for money for Bethany College. And many times Mother said he'd come over so disgusted. He said, "I've been out all day to the farmers, and he had a chicken and a dozen eggs was all he could raise." So he had a rough time. And when the trip he went to California where he died, he was on a $1 million endowment at that time, and of course he died and never got any money at all.
I understand that a romance in your family developed through one of the friends of Dr. Swensson who he used to visit.
And by the way, today at this school where my brother Earl's wife went to school, she was a Simcox. They're having the 100th anniversary of the opening of that school where Mrs. Fossberg has her art museum now.
And, not at Forsberg.
Yeah, and the Simcox lived about 2 miles south, and Uncle Carl used to come there, and Mrs. Simcox would always give him coffee and duff or feed him, you know. And she thought that Uncle Carl was a wonderful person, so their daughter was very talented in music. So at 15 years of old age, she was sent to Bethany College to take music from Torsain. And my brother Earl, who just passed away recently, he was 87 years old, met her at the post office, and he fell in love with her, and they dated each other. And Mr. Simcox hated Swedes, and Earl had, and a cousin of mine we call Egg Carlson, they'd sneak over there and date the girls. And the old man, if he'd catch him, he was going to whip him. So, but anyway, later on, my brother graduated from, well, he didn't graduate from the University of Illinois, but he spent 2 years at Manhattan and two years at University of Illinois. And they wouldn't give him a degree because they took a lot of subjects away like they used to do. So he and Freeberg, we call him Freebie, went to Milwaukee and worked there for a while. And then Earl got married. Lived in a big old house they bought, and kept boarders and roomers.
I see. Now we have a picture here of the Carl Swensson family. Would you identify the two girls?
Yeah, Annie Theo is the youngest one of them, and Bertha is the oldest one. And Bertha married a minister,
Axel Vestling.
Vestling, yeah, and Annie Theo never got married.
I understand that Axel Vestling was a professor at Carleton.
And he was finally the president, and he was a minister and a president.
Well, what you were saying a while ago about Dr. Carl Swensson's trips into the countryside to solicit money, to get money for the college, and the disappointment sometimes of coming back, as you said, only with a chicken and a dozen eggs. In thinking about that, I was thinking that, of course, there were 3 buildings that were constructed on campus during his presidency here, and we have a couple of pictures here of the early campus. Can you tell us what you remember and know about?
Remember, of course, I went to college here. I graduated in 28, and I used to run up the steps to the 5th floor. I could run up there in a few seconds, it seemed like, and I wondered why they had elevators in those days. Now I'm so glad they have elevators. But this building here, my mother taught art. She was quite an artist, and she never had any training. She had 2 sisters who were artists, and none of them had any training in art. And this one sister married Rockwell in New York, and this Rockwell, according to the information, was a cousin of Norman Rockwell, the famous painter for the Saturday Evening Post. And they moved this several times, and now it's down here at the
South Park.
South Park, and Old Main was a wonderful old building.
Classes were first held in Bethany Church, and then they moved that schoolhouse to. Was that area there called? I've seen it referred to as the Park. Was it the
Park? Where Professor Hall is was a park, and
yeah.
There was thousands of daisy plants in there, just beautiful. And people come there and dug them out, and finally there wasn't a daisy left, and everybody was so disappointed. And here is the Lane Hall. And
what was later known as Lane Hall, the east end of it, I guess.
Yeah.
The east end of it.
Yeah.
And the bottom picture also I see is a photograph of Lane. I understand that it was first a men's hall, and then it was converted to. I suppose when when Old Main was built, it was converted to a ladies' hall.
And then put the men upstairs on the 4th floor. There's a famous
that
The famous storytelling place and card playing place in the old days.
Yeah, I understand this was built in 1883. That really was was that the second? That was the second building really on campus that Dr. Carl Swensson had constructed. Then there is of course we have that picture over there. I think
It's a beautiful picture.
And it suggests how impressive that building must have been.
It was the tallest building between Denver and Kansas City for many, many years.
Is that right? Between Denver and Kansas
It was known for its height. It was 5 stories high, and it had a beautiful chapel. One time, Halloween, the kids brought a cow up to the chapel, and boy, did they have a tough time, Dad said, getting that cow out of that chapel.
That picture then must have been taken before 1883, because 1883 was the year that the first part of Lane Hart Hall was built, as I understand.
And see, Uncle Carl's statue wasn't around either, so that was before he died.
Yeah, this is the later picture. Picture here. Now, what do you remember about the Ling auditorium, which is pictured in the bottom picture?
That was a famous place. My dad was in charge of excursions coming in, and I've seen trains lined up for a mile along the tracks, and people come out to go to Bethany, or to the Messiah at Bethany. And I used to work at the Maxwell Garage, and I run a 1917 Maxwell taxi, and I've seen people come out of there from all over the world, and they couldn't talk. They were so thrilled. And Dad saw it, and they come out of Denver, and they come out of Kansas City, and the tracks were just loaded with people. And I played basketball in the most wonderful basketball court, and I played 4 years there.
You mentioned the Maxwell Garage. You worked at
Dean Pearson's Maxwell Garage.
You mean selling the Maxwell car automobile? I hadn't heard of that in
Yeah, I was at Dean and Pearson, and they were a wonderful old car. Jack Benny had one in 1922, and I had one similar to that.
And then this is a more recent photograph of Lane Hart Hall, as you remember. Do you know do you happen to know how it got was called Lane Hart?
I was wondering about that. I don't remember at all.
I'll do some investigating into that. Earlier, when you were identifying the daughters of Dr. Carl Swensson, you mentioned Annie Theo Swensson. What do you remember about her work at Bethany College?
Well, she was a wonderful teacher in expression. My wife took expression 3 years from her. My wife gave Smiling Through the whole book, and Annie Theo coached her. And my wife, I had the book, and she never made one mistake. Annie Theo taught all the debaters how to stand and how to gesture and all these things, and they were famous all over the country. You know, in those days, they took first place. They even beat Yale and Harvard debating team. And Martin Holcomb he gave the information, and Annie Theo taught them how to express. They were wonderful. Well, Emery Lindquist was one of them, and the Yall boys, and sister, and Sibley. You remember Lawrence Sibley?
Yes, he
was a wonderful.
He worked at the college, Leaving Development at one time.
Oh yeah, he was wonderful. And every one of them were famous as speakers, you know, afterwards. She really was a fine teacher. She never got married. And I used to see her out at Thousand Oaks. She lived out there for a while. My wife and I would go up there to see her. She still was in pretty good health then, and all of a sudden she started slipping and passed away. But she was a wonderful person and a wonderful teacher.
She was also the director of the plays, the dramas.
Oh yeah.
She
coached all that. My wife done a lot of coaching when she graduated too. She was good at it.
Your wife, you said, was an expression. They had a major in expression.
Oh
in those
yeah,
days?
and she took voice and expression, and she had a beautiful voice, wonderful voice.
Yeah. Now, earlier you mentioned your your father. I'd like to hear more about your father, Luther Swensson. We've heard, of course, an awful lot about Carl Aaron, but I think earlier you said something about when he first arrived, he pumped. What age was he when he arrived?
15.
At the age of 15.
It was pretty wild country here then. I think the Indians were still around here.
I would imagine.
And he said the buffalo grass grew 15 foot tall. And so the buffaloes would eat it down, and then when they moved back and forth from north to the south. Mm-hmm. And some of the people, old Swedes, lived in the riverbank, so the Indians couldn't get to them. They dug into the Indian bank so they could watch across the river, and if any Indians come up, they could get them.
The organ then at Bethany Church was one of those, I don't know what they call them, where someone had to stand behind and pump the air for the organ. Yeah. Well,
Dad played the organ 17 years at Messiah, and he was in the orchestra later on. His hands got bad. He had rheumatism so bad, and so that he decided to use the clarinet instead of playing with an organ or a piano. And Bethany at that time had a glee club, and they went all over the United States, and they had a orchestra that went over the United States, and a band. Dad played in the band at the World's Fair in 1903 when they had the World's Fair?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah. Dad said they would march for 2 weeks, or Bethany band advertised. So Bethany was really on the ball advertising. He was on a trip one time with the orchestra, and they had an opera singer from New York and a piano player as accompanist. And the accompanist got sick, and Dad played the piano and the whole thing and never made a mistake, they said. He was considered at that time the best piano player that ever was in Lindsborg. And that was from some of the old timers told me that. Dad never said anything. I didn't even know he could play a piano. He never mentioned anything.
And he didn't have any formal training?
No. Just a natural.
Just gifted.
And I had 6 kids, and my sister was a marvelous piano player, and she died when she was 17. But I love music, but I don't have the least idea. All I learned 8 years in grade school and in 4 years in high school was do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's all I learned. We had a teacher, and that's all she taught. Mm-hmm. And never taught anything in music. It was terrible. She was a Bethany College graduate, too. Mm-hmm. But Dad, he was quite a horseman. He used to break these Mustangs come through. There'd be sometimes 1,000 in a herd coming through, and they used to park south of the dam. It was a big fellow by the name of Anderson had
what dam are you speaking of?
The Lindsborg Dam.
Oh,
it's south now, but it used to be
where the mill
is, and south of there was the big stockyards, and they'd get in there. And Dad would trade. Maybe he'd have a Mustang he couldn't break, and he'd trade it off, and maybe he'd get a worse one. But he said that he only had that 1 or 2 that he couldn't break. But when I was a kid, those herds used to come through when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Was he wasn't, how young would he have been when he was doing this breaking of the wild horses?
Oh, in the 20s.
In the 20s.
Oscar Burton said he was a wonderful horseback rider. He said he'd still see him chasing coyotes across Crazy Ridge. They'd all go out there and chase coyotes, in Crazy Ridge. That's west of town, the Crazy Ridge area, and it was a beautiful area.
What other businesses was your father in Lindsborg?
Well, when he was young, he and Mr. Bankston and another party started a hardware store, and he was there for several years. Then Uncle Carl wanted him to run the Book Concern, and they opened that up, and Dad ran that for quite a few years.
Was it called the Bethany Book
Concern?
The Bethany Book Concern. And do you know where it was located?
Yeah, it was run right where Jederberg has his place.
Jederberg.
And right behind was
the
newspaper office right at the back, and it burned out about 1930. One evening, had a terrible fire there. It was 20 below zero when they had the fire in the newspaper office and burned it. So after that, they moved it down the street where it is now. And after he was in the Book Concern for a while, Uncle Carl was quite a politician, Republican politician, and he got Dad a postmaster's job. Dad is a Republican, and Uncle Eben was assistant. He was married to Dad's sister, Annie Swensson. She was just a couple of years older than Dad.
The lady whom you called
Foster. We all called her. That's Ann Swedish, I guess. We called her Foster. But her name was Ann. So I checked that. And Uncle Eben, he worked in the post office with Dad, and then when politics would change, Uncle Eben would be the postmaster, and then Dad would be assistant, so they worked it back and forth. So Dad, one Christmas Eve, they brought Dad home with a stroke. He lacked 1 year of getting a pension. If he'd have worked another year, he'd had a pension for life, and he missed it, didn't have it at all. He spent about 30 years in the post office. And we got a letter from one of the dispatchers on the Missouri Pacific. Flyer went through midnight. We call it the flyer. And he wrote and he said, I have never found one mistake your dad ever made. Got that letter from him. So
what a compliment.
That was true. Dad was real particular, and his mind to the last was real good. He could quote conditional record on page and paragraph. He had that good a memory when he was up in the 60s. Well, he died at 63.
I believe you were talking, when I spoke to you previously, about an incident in connection with, was it the nomination of President
Oh, yes.
McKinley?
I was riding on a bus through Lindsborg we were sitting side by side, and this fellow says, brings back memories to me. He says, I was ambassador to Sweden. I said, boy, gosh, I never heard of you. And he was an attorney from Lincoln, or one of those little towns up here, and he had an office in Wichita. He and his son had two offices. And he said, Carl Swensson threw the vote for McKinley, so McKinley got nominated, and he asked Uncle Carl what he wanted, and Uncle Carl said, I want this lawyer, his friend of Bethany, I want him to be ambassador to Sweden. And this fellow talked good Swede, and he was an American. I mean, he wasn't of Swedish descent even, but he helped Bethany a lot. And that's something strange, isn't it, to meet a man like that on a bus?
This man had helped Dr. Carl Swensson financially in connection with getting money for the college.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to hear something about your mother's family.
Mother, Olsen, mother's mother came over from Sweden. She had several children, and her dad came over from Sweden, and they weren't married, but they had families, and their husband, my father, her grandfather's wife died on the way over, and my mother's mother, her husband died, and they got married after they came over to America. They came to Chicago, and he had a farm on the Fox River at St. Charles, Illinois, and they got married, and the whole group was only 18 kids.
Only 18 kids.
And my grandmother and grandfather, they had 4. 1 son and 3 daughters, and the 3 daughters were all artists, like I told
So
before.
both had large families by their first marriages.
Yeah, and the Olsen part of the family were engineers and inventors, and the Swensson part of the family couldn't hardly learn to drive a car. They weren't mechanically minded at all. But the Olsens, and my brother Earl, youngest son, is an architect in Nashville, and he designed a Grand Ole Opera Hotel, and it's famous worldwide. If you want to go down there, you want to see it. I've been in it. It's grand. It's only 3 stories high, but it's spread out a lot. And they just spent $40 million, and they have a glass edition, all glass, $40 million spent there.
Now you're speaking about
Earl.
about your brothers.
Earl.
Oh,
Son.
Earl's
brothers
son.
are, yeah.
Maybe you could tell us about your immediate family, your brothers, and the sister that passed away.
Well, my sister Helga passed away at 17. She had cancer of the hip. She was thrown into a tree ice skating, cracking a whip, and developed cancer. She died when she was 17. And my brother Carl is the oldest, and he died, oh gosh, when did he die? He was 65 when he died. I think he was born in 1890 and died at 65. He was a druggist. And his wife is now in the rest home at Bethany Rest Home. She's 95 years old and very, very sick woman. And Earl died about 2 years ago, and he was a DuPont executive. And one of his sons is a big shot with DuPont right now in Wilmington, Delaware. And then Lester, he studied to be a minister, but never did go through with it, and he worked at a newspaper office as a linotype operator. My brother Bert was a druggist. He's just older than me, a couple of years older than me, and he's been dead for about 10, 12 years. He lived in McPherson, and his wife is the rest home up here, Vivian Swensson. So, and I'm the last.
I see. And who again was the father of the architect of the Grand Ole Opry Hotel?
It was Earl, brother Earl.
Earl.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was on a ranch his last years in Springfield, Missouri, on a large ranch. His daughter and her husband raised Arabian horses there.
I see. Yeah. And who was the father of Eldon Swensson in Wichita?
Lester.
Lester.
And a strange thing in my family, none of us were artists at all, but every grandson except one is artist. My two sons are artists, and Earl's one son is an artist, and Eldon is an artist, and they were good artists. And so it jumped one generation, the art.
Your father had a great deal of musical talent. I suppose that was inherited by your sister Helga.
Yeah, she was the only one in the family who was musically talented. None of the rest of them.
And who did she take lessons?
Torsain. And she was the only young person that Torsain ever taught. He wouldn't teach any young kids, but she was so good, he said, that he'd teach her. So Torsain was by the way, in our family, Torsain was over at our house a lot. Rossi was over there a lot. John Holmberg, he was an inventor. John Holmberg invented this Holmberg steam trap.
Of the shop downtown?
Yeah.
Blacksmith shop?
Holmberg. And no, he had a machine shop, and he sold Oberlins. And he was quite a man. And then Berger Sansane was over there. Ludwig Nielsen and his wife were over there. And my home was just paradise. Mm-hmm. And there was 6 kids, and every meal was dinner and supper. We had pie. And Brother Earl would always eat the pie first. And folks said, you can't have the pie first. And Earl would always eat the pie first. And I used to visit him a lot, my wife and I, down in Springfield. We'd go out to eat, and he'd always eat the pie first. It's just a quirk. But the Augustana Synod met here every 4 years. And all the preachers would come out to see Dad, you know. They all knew him. And I'd sit up practically all night listening to those guys tell stories, and it was so interesting. Mm-hmm. So I had a marvelous childhood. And then I worked at the Maxwell Garage, and if I could drive a car a block, it was worth it. Any kind of an effort. I just a car nut. And Carl Dean trained me to start cars, because nobody knew anything about cars, and the farmers would get stuck, and I'd go out and start their cars. And I bet I've started 1,000 cars on the road because of my background of tracing down and finding out what was wrong, you know. And so I had a wonderful life.
You did some mechanical work.
Oh, I was a mechanic. That's where I worked my way through college.
So you were an exception then to what you said. That
I was an Olson, not a Swensson.
You were an Olson, not a Swensson.
Yeah.
What has been your principal occupation then, most of your life since then?
Well, insurance and real estate. Gene Minjamik hired me to be a field man when I got out of college. His insurance company, he gave me a briefcase, and he said, Paul, all the instructions are here. I said, well, I've never seen an insurance policy. How can I be a field man? And field man was, you went out and solicited agents and helped them. But boy, I studied whatever was in that briefcase, so I got pretty sharp after a while. But that's the way I started insurance business. And then my health went bad. I had a lot of broncho trouble, and I was advised to leave, and ended up in Englewood, Colorado for my health reasons. And I was in the real estate and insurance business. And I'd done some adjusting when I was a field man. And when I retired at 62, I was what they call a stormtrooper. I went all over the United States adjusting hurricanes and hailstorms and tornadoes and so on. So I had a very interesting life and enjoyed it very much.
A while back when you were talking about Ling Auditorium, I was wondering if you remember any famous singers who would have come to Ling.
Schumann Heinck. She was singing, and she was a lovely person. I hauled her around too, and she was always griping about the Brunswick Hotel. She didn't like the Brunswick Hotel. It wasn't fancy enough. And she there was a baby crying in the crowd, and Schumann Hank stopped and sung a lullaby.
Really?
And then went on singing. Oh, she was so great.
Any others that you?
Gally Kirchie. I hauled Spaulding, the great violinist, to Wichita in a rainy, stormy deal in the afternoon. They used to have great artists. They were in the afternoon, and then the Messiah was at night.
Yes.
And Spaulding was there, and I hauled him, and he was a marvelous person. He was great. So I was acquainted with so many of them. Oh, by the way, when I was about 16, 17 years old, about 90 singers came over from Sweden. Oh, boy, were they great. And we hauled them around, and we hauled them up to Selmsburg, the old church. You ever hear about the old church that had all the clocks?
No.
The old Swedish Lutheran church up there. I think it was a Lutheran church. You go in his house, and boy, every room had clocks, and they're all running. It was really something. And the Swedes, they could talk a little English, and I could talk a little Swede, so we got along pretty good. We took them up to Coronado Heights. I helped when they built Coronado Heights, and we all got together and made the road up there, and then built that building up there.
You helped to build Coronado Heights?
Yeah, the road up there and the building up there. So, and we took them up there, and then took them to Selmsburg and around, and they were sure disgusted because they didn't get to see an Indian. That's what they wanted to see, was an Indian and a coyote. They wanted to see a coyote.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I had a wonderful life, and Lindsborg meant a lot to me.
I understand that you were on one of the terrible suites.
Yeah. No, I'm just terrible old and cranky.
Would you like to talk about
I wanted
some of your...
Here's your cousin here, Lester Flurry, is a great friend of mine. Here's Glenn Tarrant. I was in Wichita Friday and Saturday, and they said he almost passed away last Tuesday. Here's Bill Carmichael. He's the brother of the Carmichael on the farm out here.
Is that right?
Yeah, Bill. He was All-State center, or All-State end for years. And Lester was All-State.
Now, what year was this team that you're talking about?
25.
1925.
Yeah, it was 1925. No one crossed our goal line. I want to tell you
the whole year, the whole season?
Yeah, the whole season. I want to tell you a story about Skillings. Stan Skillings was the fastest runner in history of football at that time in Kansas. Of all the schools, no one could outrun him. He used to run backwards, and we'd run forward, and he'd holler, "Come on, gang, let's go. Little high boys, 3 little high boys." And he had feet, I think he wore a 14 shoe and flat feet, and he run like this, a duck. And boy, could he run. And we were playing Salina, and it was Mark Isaacson was supposed to go to school here, but he couldn't get a job, so he went to Westland. And he was a fast man. And Skillings had a damaged shoulder, and he shouldn't have even played, but he was so good that Dad played him. And I was playing center. Lester got hurt, and I was playing center, and I threw the ball to Skillings, or Art Olson, and then he gave it to Skillings. And Skillings went around this way, and Martin Isaacson was coming this way. We played the whole game. We didn't have we played offense and defense. We never didn't play like they do today, but we played the whole game. And Martin was fullback, and he came at Skillings like this, and Skillings went way around like this and made a touchdown. And Martin never did catch him. And Les Edmonds was the official, and he said to Stan, he said, "Did you get any sand in your pocket when you took that curve?" So, boy, was he fast. And this is Barkley. Now, Emery's still alive. And most of these...
Barkley, did you say?
He's a cousin. His mother is a Shugri, and Ken Shugri's aunt is his mother. And Emery was coaching.
Any relation to Roy or Barkley?
No relation at all. No. And here's Art Olson, the greatest quarterback. He looked this way and throw the ball this way. I never saw him, and I played with him 6 years playing football. I never saw him ever throw a pass away. Well, he was perfect. And this guy stand out there and catch it, and the old Carp stood like this, looked like he wasn't going to do anything. And boy, all of a sudden, boy, he was gone. He made touchdown after touchdown, and Art just threw to him. And here's Reuben Spong. He was a storyteller from Texas. His brother was a preacher in Kansas City. Forget his name. Reuben was a storyteller, and he played football.
And where is your picture there?
Right here. I look a little younger, I think. This is Fred Wolf. He was the Wolf family that run the big store in Kansas City, and they were millionaire people. They run a big elevator in Ellenwood, Kansas. There's Jack Jacobs. His dad was a doctor here. This was city electrical manager for years.
What is his name?
I can't think of it right now. I know it as well as I know my own.
Do you remember any other, who were some of the teams that you played in those days?
Well, we played Pittsburgh Teachers, Hayes Teachers, and Washburn, and McPherson, and Sterling. Boy, Sterling used to have, they had professionals on their team. Oh, they had 3 teams. The third team was as big as the first team. Oh, they were a crew. And we played Fairmont at Wichita Youth. It was called Fairmont. We played Friends University. We played Bethel. That was at Newton. And Westland. We always had a grudge game. In basketball, Westland never would beat us. And one night we were playing basketball here, and we were ahead, maybe 10, 15 points. Westland team got the ball and sat on it till the half was over, or till the first half. And second half we played, and they took the ball and sat on it, and everybody was just raising Cain, you know. We just went over and sat down. And I was on a bus with Stu Dunbar, and he was a sports writer for the Salina Journal, and also done some fishing. And I said, "What happened that night? Why did Salina do that, or Westland do that?" And he said, "Mackey had a big bet on a game that Lindsborg, Bethany wouldn't beat him on so many points, and he won his bet." So that's some of the things. And Ad Lindsay was our coach that time, and he was All-American from KU. Boy, he could punt a ball almost from one end of the field to the other. And he was a baseball player. He played in triple A, I believe it was in Toronto at the time. When he came back, he'd have bales of towels from all the big famous hotels back in the East. He'd send 3-4 bales of towels, and that's what we used to dry ourselves with. And he had, if you put your sock on wrong, he wouldn't let you take it off. That was hard luck. If you saw a hearse, never look at it, because that was tough luck. You'd never win a game. And he had just full of all those quirks, and we'd just have to watch what we're doing so that we wouldn't get in trouble with him. But that's baseball.
Yes. Did I understand that you had a nephew who was a professional player, or who?
No.
I thought someone was. Maybe I'm mistaken about that.
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories about the terrible Swedes? Oh, I wanted to ask you something. I've heard that sometimes players were recruited who weren't even students. Is this true?
Well, we had players on our team that were in the what they call academy, and they were high school. And they played on the Bethany team. They were high school players, and they shouldn't have been playing with us. And some of them were taking music and so on and played on our team. And that
I think probably it was in the earlier days.
Oh yeah, they
might have been true.
Under the terrible Swedes, the early terrible Swedes. Oh, see, I'll tell you about some of the old characters around town.
All right, that'd be interesting.
J.O. Sundstrom. He had a Maxwell, about a 1912 Maxwell on it. The running board was about this high, and then you stepped into it about that high, and he's a little tiny Swedish Jew. And he had the first fine building uptown, still there, the Sundstrom building, right across from where the dentist had his office. Well, on this corner, where the hardware store is next to
it.
That's part of
library.
Yeah, the community library. Well, he had this old Maxwell, and he never stopped till he hit something. And right back was the post office, right across the alley, and above was the telephone office. And they had a great big post where all the wires came in. And that old man, he'd back up that old Maxwell, and when he hit that post, he'd stop, and then he'd go forward. And so they had to put steel bands around this post so he wouldn't chew it up. And one day he was backing out south of the building, and Mr. Malm just bought a brand new Buick. It was a 1915 Buick, green. It was a pretty car with yellow wheels, you know. And he comes sailing by, and old Sundstrom backed up like this and hit Mr. Malm. And then he said to Mr. Malm, he says, "Mr. Malm, if you'd have stayed home today, this would have never happened." But he'd come in the garage, and we had two bumps. First one's up like this, and then the other one was kind of like that. And he just jump all over, and then he hit it in the wall, forget to turn the switch key off, and then he come back for his car, and the battery would run down. Oh, what a time. And he had a new house built for Swensson, corner of Swensson in Maine, and he went out there with his wife, and they moved all of the stakes. He thought it ought to be bigger, so the carpenter started in there, and they wondered what was wrong with us, because nothing fits. They found out he'd maybe moved all the stakes. And then there was a Peterson, the shoe cobbler. He bought a 1910-12 Buick, and the clutches in those days were, pedals were about this long. When you dropped it back, they'd jump about 20 feet, you know. And he got this Buick, and he came home, and he went through the front doors and out the back. So he had doors put at the back. And so when he'd come, if he couldn't stop, he'd just go through and go down the alley and come around. Maybe I've seen him go around that thing 4 or 5 times before he got her stopped. So we had some characters. Old Reverend Olson used to come in from Burdick, and he had an old Overland. And the old Overlands, the valve covers didn't have the valves covered, and the lifters go up and down. They were wide open enough where the dust would get to them, and they were noisy. And he'd always come in and say, "Oh, that's a beautiful car. And the engine part runs so good some new." He'd always say that, and you could hear that thing run for 2 blocks. It was just a wreck. But he always said that every time he'd come in. He'd park it in there, and we'd work on it. So that's a few of the characters.
What were like for many years, the Swedish bakery, was that in a popular place in?
Oh, Harrelson and Johnson run that. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was, boy, the ham, you never ate such ham in your life. And they had salted peanuts, fixed them every day. And if you weren't in there early, you never got a salted peanut. They just went out there, and they had a tray about like this, salted peanuts and ham. I was in the real estate office in Santa Barbara, and I was just talking to a fellow, and I told him my name. He said, "Well," he said, "you used to go to Lindsborg." He said, "I'm from Salina with the Eberhard Grain Company." And he said, "We'd drive down a lot of evenings to Lindsborg to get a ham sandwich." So they were famous for their ham sandwiches. And coffee. Oh, they made big pots of coffee about like this, and they put an egg in it, you know, the white of an egg. And King Oscar, Lester Davis was a character here. Did you ever hear about him?
Davis?
Yeah, Lester Davis.
Yes.
He came out here to die, and he was a great friend of Dad. He had TB, and it was real bad. And he came out in the early days when Dad was young, and came out here to die. And then he developed this King Oscar, and he went around with different sacks, would be a pound, 2 pound, and 5 pound, and sell to the farmers. He had a horse and buggy, and he went all around the country. And then he got Norling to do that. And then he got a car, a 1927 Buick Coupe. And he's the one that started. Everybody had an urn in those days, you know, most of them, except the bakery didn't have an urn. But he started using these little dealies, little electric vehicles, where you just make a few cups of
coffee urns, coffee pots.
Yeah, and he's the one that started. And a lot of restaurantmen told me, he told them how to run a restaurant, and they all made money. And he was a marvelous Christian man. He was a Methodist, and he used to promote the revivals. They used to have revivals. They always had a converted Jew, a little fat guy, and old Lester Davis would take him to the Royal Cafe. That was the North Cafe. That's across from...
on the east side.
Yeah, across from the Jederberg's Book Concern. And that Jew, we used to go up there and watch him. That Jew would eat 2 big steaks after holding a meeting. Old Lester Davis always paid, you know. So we had some characters. One and John Hallberg. Bethany couldn't have gone on unless all those businessmen really backed Uncle Carl. They really were
All the
terrific.
businessmen were behind
Oh,
it.
they were terrific people. A lot of strong characters. We had, I think, 5 department stores in the early days. We had a shoe store, and we had cobblers, and we had 2 drug stores. And now it's a lot different because of McPherson's flying.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about Chautauquas or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had Chautauqua right up by Presser Hall. That's where they had Chautauqua. And they had famous people, just wonderful people came in there, and they'd stay here a week. And they had the best town in the United States was Chautauqua's.
Would they come in the summertime, I presume?
Oh, yeah, in the summertime. Had a big tent and put on performance. And I think I told you about Blind Boone, too.
Yes.
Blind Boone was a colored man, and he come here, and they tried to trap him in the music. And, of course, Dad was telling him about they'd stay up all night trying to trap him. And they had a professor here who was a graduate of the University of Paris, and he was, Dad said he pretty much was smart aleck, you know, he thought he was pretty hot. And he played a real hard number, and Blind Boone played it, and then he would come to different things. And now here's where you made a mistake, I'll correct it. Dad said, boy, they just couldn't trap him. He was blind, and he knew, he'd hear a number once, and he could play it. He was a marvelous person. He came here every year, Blind Boone, and played. I saw him when I was a kid. And they used to have, every month they had special things. Quartets come in, and what's his name from Chicago, Paul Frost, the great poet, singer in Chicago. Had the cat.
Sandberg?
Yeah, Sandberg. He was here. I heard him. Boy, the crowd was just sat there just motionless, and he'd have to sing and do something to break up the tension. Oh, Carl Sandberg. He's the one of the fog come on Catspeed in Chicago.
Yeah.
So he put on a performance here. But we had every month we had marvelous things going on at Bethany in those days.
I think Carl Sandberg, I believe, had some relatives around here.
He might have had.
I wanted to ask a question. These days, there is such a strong effort to maintain contact with Sweden, to develop our Swedish culture, heritage. Was that true in the earlier days?
Well, Uncle Carl made quite a few trips to Sweden. You know, he was knighted 3 times by the King of Sweden, and he was back there, and the Swedish people were really for him. I think they probably helped Bethany too financially. You know, they gave him the building where it's down at the South Park now. The building, the Swedish building,
Swedish Pavilion.
Pavilion. That was in St. Louis Fair, and Sweden gave that to Uncle Carl. They brought it back here in pieces, and they put it up. And Berger Sansane had his studio in that. My mother took art at 60 years old. At that time, she took watercolors. She done beautiful watercolor work.
And I believe I read where the king donated books to the library.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were very close friends, the King of Sweden and Uncle Carl. And Uncle Carl wrote several books in Swedish. And I have some of those books. And Jonas Swensson wrote, I don't know when they had time, Jonas Swensson wrote several books too. And I have one of those. I think I'll give it to my children. I have 2 boys.
Well, can you think of anything else?
No, let's see. Let me look at. I'll tell you a crazy story about when I was a freshman. We had a terrible team. Lester Floor was playing, and Reuben Spong, and a number of Skillings wasn't playing with us then, I don't think. But we beat Bethel, and we were playing McPherson. McPherson, they hadn't lost a game, and I blocked 3 punts. And I was playing. Lester got hurt right away, and I was playing center, and I played against 2 boys that weighed about 2 and a quarter, and I weighed around 150, but I was real fast. I blocked 3 punts, and I was just picking up the punt, and Art Bunston, one of our players, came along and kicked it, and the McPherson guy got it, and we were that close to making a touchdown. I'd have picked the ball up and made a touchdown probably. It wasn't far from the goal line. But they made 20 first downs. We didn't make a one. They beat us 6-0. If I'd have got a hold of that ball, we might have made 7 points and beat them. Now that's some score. And then when we were so terrible when I was a freshman, and Carl Lincoln is an ex-coach here, and he was postmaster, and he was at Humor's. The Lincoln family grew up here, and so he caught Art Olson and Art Lunsford and me, and right by the college, and he said, he lived right north of college. He said, I'm going to tell you guys how to win next football game. We were playing Westland, and they were both to beat us 40-0. And he said, get the signals mixed. And Ad Lindsay said, about 2 weeks before we was playing, he said, you guys aren't even worth doing anything. Just go out there and kick the ball around and throw the ball around. So we horsed around and messed around. And then he finally said, Paul, I want you to play pulling guard. Spong was pulling guard, and he weighed about 200 pounds, and I weighed about 150. And so we went up to Westland. It was cold, it snowed, and it was miserable. The ground was frozen. And so I was pulling guard, and Warren Center was in the backfield, and he was fast. He was real fast, and he was hurt too, so he was kind of didn't want to get hit. But anyway, I pulled, and in the end, it's the funniest thing. I never will believe it could happen. But I never hit the end. I chased him. He run backwards, and Warren Center made 2 touchdowns over me. We beat Westland 14-0. And I never touched that end. I don't know why Mackey wouldn't pull a guy like that. I don't know. But he run backwards, and it was easy. I never had any work to do. And Warren just followed me and made 2 touchdowns. And we came back in those days. They had the bazaar at Ling Hall, or not the bazaar at the auditorium. We
kind of
called
like fair, I believe they called it.
Yeah, and Mrs. Prexy, she was like me because I used to drive for them all the time, and I always liked to drive for Prexy because she had to eat every 20 miles, chocolates or hamburgers or something, and I was always hungry. I was 6'2" and weighed 150 pounds and skinny as the dickens. But anyway, when we came back from winning that game, she was just crazy, and she put us up on the auditorium where the performers were, and we ate up there turkey. It was about 30 of us kids eating turkey. I'll never forget that. Boy, were we proud.
I would imagine.
Yeah. And Mrs. Prexy, she liked me, and she said, kill him, Paulie. She called me Paulie. I could still hear her yelling, kill him, Paulie, kill him. And when we played basketball, I was a guard, and Art Olson was a guard, and she and Eileen Hinman were right above where I stood. And I was just afraid they were going to fall out on me because they'd lean way out and they went crazy. Oh, both of them were nuts about athletics. And I was thinking, well, when are you going to hit me in the head? Yeah, we were playing basketball, and the alumni always came back to play. And Cash Carlson, he was quite an athlete. He coached Bethany, and he was my coach in high school, so I knew what he was going to do. So he got the ball at the tip-off, and he'd run right at you, run over you. And I just stepped aside, and he fell in the benches underneath the balcony there, and knocked him out, and he never played it. He played about 1 second, and he came away from El Dorado to play. But oh boy, he was rough. He could sure run. He'd just run right over you. Boy, he was strong.
Has your enthusiasm and interest for sports, have you maintained that over the years?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Football, baseball fan, basketball fan to this day?
I never played much baseball because we were track. I made 12 letters here, I believe.
They didn't have baseball.
No, they quit baseball just when I was in high school. Football, basketball, and track. I was a high jumper and a high hurdler and a broad jumper. Track and guard and basketball, and football I played guard and center.
Well, we certainly thank you for.
Okay, I'm glad to be
We
here.
really enjoyed your reminiscences and talking about.
I'll think of a lot of things I forgot to tell you. But to give a little of this and that, and these old characters, we had some wonderful people in this town.
No doubt about it.
Oh, I want to tell you, you've got another minute?
Yeah.
I just sit down there. I want to tell you, I lived at O.E. Erickson. He was a contractor and he built bridges. And he was building a bridge on the Meridocene River. And it started raining, and all the men had to do was put 2 bolts in at the end. And it started raining real hard, and they left the bolts out. And that night it flooded, and the bridge went down into the river, Meredithine River, and just broke over the everything. And I stayed with him about 2 weeks because his wife, he threatened to commit suicide because he wasn't the idea of losing the money, but he was so good to his men. When in the wintertime they didn't have work, he'd furnish them food and coal and everything. He was just that kind of guy, great big Swede, and he was a wonderful man. And he got a call from Ebba Thornburg Bank. She says, "Oh, we want to talk to you up the bank." So I took him up the bank. It's a Farmer State Bank, a little old bank where the city office is now. And Mr. Norbert I didn't know him very well because he never spoke to kids. You know, we kids, if they didn't speak to you, we didn't like him very well. But he was kind of a retired sort of fellow, and he's a retired farmer. And he handed a $25,000 check to O.E. Erickson. He said, "O.E., get back in business." O.E. said, "I can't." I said, "I can't do it." "I mean it. Here's $25,000 start you out." And O.E. said, "Well, I'll sign some paper." "No, I'll take it. Go back in business." And that's the kind of people we had.
And there are such people today also.
Yeah, also, you bet your life. Yeah. And when John Gustafson, when Dad had a stroke Christmas Eve, John Gustafson and Ludwig Nielsen came over and stayed with Dad for quite a while. So they were kind people and interested in other people. And that's what made Bethany go.
Right.
And it's still going the same way.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, you're sure welcome. I never got scared either.